everybody, this is Eve West. Thank you for tuning in to my YouTube channel. This channel ultimately is dedicated to promoting a book I wrote. It's called Follow. It's an ebook. You can find it on Amazon.com under the Kindles tab. And this really, if you want to know what Follow is about, just look at the part 1 of this video. I pretty much explain what Follow is about, and I just really want to get into finishing up and kind of doing a recap of what I talked about in part 1 about the solar plexus and sexual abuse and cognitive dissonance. Just to kind of get right into it, I talked about the solar plexus and how the solar plexus is the seat of your will and creativity. That's why, the soul is connected to the solar plexus, and so that's where they get the term soul. And so, whenever your solar plexus is knocked out of balance, such as with myself, with sexual abuse and mind programming, it causes an imbalance in the soul, or the solar plexus. And solar is connected to the sun, and sun really correlates to Jesus. And so your solar plexus is crucified when you come into the matrix. That's why I talked about crucifying Jesus. It's talking about the solar plexus, taking away your will. And I talked about in the Bible story of Philemon, I talked about how in Philemon, the King James Version mentions the solar plexus as bowels, which is your stomach. That's your solar plexus. However, the NIV actually translates bowels to heart. And so when Jesus is often depicted, he's depicted with his heart in chains. And so this is really indication that the solar plexus is the seat of your will, your desires, what you want. And so the solar plexus is definitely rotted out and imbalanced. So you, to ensure that you are a slave and you do not do the things that you want to do here, that you are under the dominion of a handler or a master. They call themselves in the New Age ascendant masters, and so that makes them sound all pious and so forth. Like in the New Age, I remember when I first, started getting into the New Age, it was like, oh, ascendant master. Ascendant meaning that they're gods, they're above us, and masters, they've mastered the mind. But really, ascendant just means dead, and master just means that they own slaves. It's not like they've mastered anything. And so, that's why the English language, my handler had me major in English in college, because, English has double meanings. I call it the devil's language. And so, technically they can say they didn't lie and say that they were ascended masters because they're dead and they own slaves. And they will tell you, oh, you took it the way in terms of ascendant meaning something pious, and master meaning something that we've conquered the mind and conquered the world, and so you haven't conquered it. And so there's always double meanings to things, and that's what makes these beings so disgusting and filthy and degenerate and evil. They really try to find loopholes in terms of how to get out of things and use the law and create laws. If they can't get out of something, they create a law to get out of it. And so really, to be honest with you, when you look at that, and from an objective standpoint, it really goes to show that they're crooks. They are crooks. And so, this channel is really just dedicated to promoting, or not promoting, but exposing them and exposing them as being crooks. And so, I really just talked a lot about my solar plexus and how, the solar plexus is in balance with sexual abuse and so forth. And, I talked about, like I said, the contradictions fed into our consciousness. And, in terms of, other various constructs of the matrix, like media and entertainment, how the 7 deadly sins are perpetuated within our consciousness, although we're judged for partaking in them. And, this seems harmless because you think you have a choice, but really, if you are fed information subliminally, you are a slave. You do not have a conscious choice to do something or not to do something. And so I really talk about that, and I talk about in our spiritual doctrines, like the Bible, and how King James of Scotland, in the King James Version, and the Bible itself, just in general, has so many contradictions fed into it. And that it's harmful to the mind. especially, when you're doing it subconsciously, because people who go to church, they don't, go to church to hear the Bible. Well, they go to church to hear the Bible. It bypasses their pineal or their frontal cortex, and it goes into their temporal. And so the preacher picks out certain scripture. They don't get to read it typically. But I mean, well, people read it, with the pastor, but the pastors just pick and choose what they want the people to hear. So, for example, the book that I share with you, Philemon, that has the occult knowledge of what the solar plexus is, they're not going to give you a book like that. And even if they did, they would just have you read it from the superficial. They would not have you read it from the way a master would read it, the way the Freemasons would read it. And so, as a sheep, or what have you, or a lamb to be sacrificed, they just want to keep you dumbed down, and they don't want you to know what the real significance of these particular books of the Bible are. And so, I really talk about the soul, the solar plexus, and how that correlates to the sun, and how that correlates to Jesus, and how, the solar plexus is hijacked by the matrix, because they take your will away, and they just make you into a false ego. So if you're born into a family that's Christian, you'll be Christian. If you're born into a family that's Jewish, you'll be Jewish. They pretty much have, decided a long time ago what your careers are going to be. It's really kind of like a socialism in a way, fascism, in a way, a socialistic society. And we don't really necessarily recognize how socialistic it is, but underlyingly, that's what it is. And we identify with this ego, but according to the wheel of the zodiac, everything that we are here has been predetermined. And so that's why people identify so much with their zodiac sign. And so, it's all about getting past the rainbow of the zodiac. The different signs of the zodiac are connected to birthstones. And so that's what you call the rainbow, the wheel of the zodiac. That's why in that movie, The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy is singing that song, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. She's talking about escaping the wheel of rebirth, somewhere beyond the wheel of reincarnation is really what it's about. A lot of MK Ultra Monarch program slaves are shown, they're shown The Wizard of Oz, because it has a lot to do with, being mind programmed within the Matrix. Dorothy going to see the wizard. The wizard is the person, the elite that governs this false matrix reality, and the witch actually is Dorothy. The witch is actually Dorothy, but it's a subconscious, what you would call unconscious aspect of Dorothy. And so the reason why there's an unconscious aspect of her is because of the wizard. He is to blame. He is Professor Marvel. And so, because all the characters that Dorothy, faces when she is in Oz are in another dimension. And so Professor deals with information, a teacher. So she's been taught, really, or given like a false, I would say, psychic reading by Professor Marvel. And so in giving her a false reading, it creates chaos within her mind. Going back to the Egyptian god Set, and how the Egyptian god Set it correlates to weather, bad weather, storms, and chaos. So she gets swept up into a tornado that lands her in Oz. And so, I talk about in my book how there is a realm beyond this realm where you live, and you work out your restrictions that you have within the Matrix. And so this is Oz. Oz is composed of people who are just working out their restrictions from being an ego. And in Oz, you don't really have rules and things like that, like you do as an ego back at home, per se. And so, I really just talk about how Dorothy's unconscious was created. I really want to point out how Dorothy's unconscious is created by the the professor, who actually is the Wizard of Oz, who is in a way God. That is Dorothy's God, but he's not the real God. He's just a trickster, a bah humbug. As Dorothy's mind and her body and soul uncover that this man that actually has been lying to her And so, and correlating to me, it would be King James of Scotland. So I would be Dorothy. And my handler, the one behind the curtain, would be King James of Scotland. But anywho, that would be my God, so to speak. Because Dorothy is told that the wizard, she needs to go see the wizard, but really, the wizard could not help Dorothy. In fact, he didn't think that she was going to really overcome all the obstacles that he put in her way anyway. She was supposed to have, you know, given up or what have you, and just like all the other predecessors of Dorothy, you know, become susceptible to the unconscious mind, to the witch. That's why, the person, the witch that was before the Wicked Witch of the West, got a house dropped on her. And so she was wearing Dorothy's shoes. So that goes to show that, oftentimes we transition out, we leave the body. And so the witch actually inhabits the body as opposed to us, who are the true inheritors of the body. We're the true inheritors of the body and of the sacral and of the kundalini, whatever you want to call it, to be able to manifest at will. And so, at the end of the movie, Dorothy, realizes her divinity, and she uses her shoes to take her home. But the wizard, who is the false god, who was the handler, could not, send Dorothy home. He could not do that. In fact, he wanted to, take Dorothy off with him somewhere until Toto, exposes him and says, hey, this is not right. Cats and dogs don't mix. They have nothing in common. And so, Dorothy is able to go back home. But, I just kind of want to throw that in there, in terms of, how we're programmed within the matrix, and how after we have been sexually abused and I would say targeted and conditioned and indoctrinated into the matrix with mind programming and subliminally programmed as slaves, when we start to wake up, our kundalini starts to come back and that snake starts to rise. And so the divinity that makes us gods comes back and illuminates us. And so it illuminates us to the truth in terms of what the handler had done, if you will, while we were, ignorant. And so this causes cognitive dissonance, because what we're programmed to believe is it goes against what we find out to be true. So if we are told to love Jesus, he died for our sins, and Jesus physically died on the cross, and then when we come to find out there's a book in the Bible where he doesn't die at all, but we've been observing Easter, it's like, wait a second, this causes cognitive dissonance or crucifixion, because you're being put against yourself. When you find out Jesus, the name Jesus doesn't have any power like you were taught as a kid. There's power in the name of Jesus. But when you find out that his name wouldn't have been Jesus, because the letter J did not exist during the time that he would have walked the earth, it creates cognitive dissonance because it goes against your programming. And so this is done on purpose. They revealed the truth at the end on purpose to crucify you, so they can get good negative loose energy from your suffering, because the people that govern this existence are very sick and sad, and they need a mirror instead of a gavel. They're really disgusting degenerates, and they're no better. They're far worse than humans. I can say that. I can say that because I'm God. And so because I am God, I can say that they are, and people may consider that to be blasphemy. That's fine. But when I can see what you've done to me, and I can point out, certain chapters of the Bible, like Philemon, and how it talks about the differences between the King James Version and the NIV, and they replace bowels with heart, and I can prove that your bowels is your solar plexus, and that the heart of Jesus is always depicted in chains. Yes, I can declare myself as so. And your Bible even says that we are gods, and so I am God. And so as a result, if you don't like that, too bad, so sad. I really don't care. But anywho, it really goes to show that there is, the Bible and just all the various constructs of the Matrix really causes you to fight yourself. And so they're very disgusting, menacing, degenerate, and they really get a good, tasty meal off of seeing you fight yourself. And so they facilitate an environment to make you fight yourself, to make your conscious fight your unconscious, and it's very sick and it's disgusting. And they get off scot-free from this stuff. I really just don't understand how they're able to do this to people, and rot out their divinity, and really steal people's birthright. There have been many times that I've made attempts to what I would call escape the wheel of rebirth or the Akashic record, and really just unveil the truth, about existence, and how I've had people, demons really, run away from me, literally run away from me when I go to speak the truth. And that goes to show that you're a fraud, that you're a fake, that you walk amongst me, that your little minions walk amongst me, if you will, to keep me in check. And as soon as the truth and the light shows up, you run away. That goes to show that you have no power, and that you really have fear, and you need to do your own doctrine. You know what they say, practice what you preach. Well, if you preach against fear, then you shouldn't have any. So, although it's very difficult going through crucifixion and cognitive dissonance or contradictions and being, put against yourself within your own consciousness, it is kind of comical that, the judgments that they impose upon you are really judgments that they are themselves guilty of. So, it's a little different, but they don't want to sit in front of you and disclose that. They're too prideful. Although they tell you have pride. It's so funny. It's kind of like a kid. Like, I'm a mother. If I were teaching my daughter something and I told my daughter, it's bad that you, I don't know, something simple, like, you curse or you use profanity. But I use profanity all the time. And I say to her, it's bad to use profanity. She's, not only is she going to use profanity, right, when I'm not around, but also I look like a hypocrite. It's like, how dare you tell me not to do something and you do it, and then you whoop my ass for doing it. That makes you look crazy, and you have no credibility. And not only that, but I have no respect for you. We're taught to have respect for our elders, but I respect none of my elders. I respect none of my elders. And when I talk about elders, not from the superficial, but in the metaphysics, I respect none of my elders. You do not have my respect. When I'm being brought to judgment and stretched wide, you do not have my respect. You are not respectable. Okay? So, we're going to get that out the way before we even get to judgment or what have you, because you are a fraud. You are fake. And you need to do your own stuff. Practice what you preach and stop being a liar, because the elders that govern this existence, they are liars, and they are cowards, with a capital C. And so, I just really wanted to point out those contradictions that are fed into our consciousness. And when you look at brainwave frequencies and so forth, you see that they really affect us in very detrimental ways when you are not conscious. The mind is composed of everything. And so, when you, I used the example, if in the beta brainwave frequency of the ego, if I flash something in front of your face and you could not recall quickly what I quickly flash in front of you, your unconscious can, but consciously you cannot. So that makes me God. That makes me God, because I know there's something in your mind unconsciously that you don't know. And because I know what's in there, but you don't know what's in there, I can bring you to judgment. I can bring you to judgment for it. And I can govern your ego based upon what I know about you, but you don't know about you. And that's very sick and disgusting. And so, when you're in the brainwave frequency of theta, which is a slower brainwave frequency of deep meditation and hypnosis, and you're feeding contradictions into the mind, you're destroying the mind. And, eventually the mind will be brought to judgment about the filthy and disgusting things, or even just contradictions that you're putting into it. Contradictions don't even have to be necessarily filthy and disgusting, but, like, say, for example, the Bible. I pointed out in my last video that there are tons of contradictions in the Bible. And this goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. In fact, and at the beginning of the Bible, they're telling you what they're doing in terms of contradictions. Whenever the powers that be divide Adam, the masculine, or the astral body, or the unconscious mind, from Eve, the conscious mind, or what you would call God. And so when you're dividing God the devil, you are, creating separation that causes dissociation, really. You know what I mean? You're putting contradictions into the mind. The mind doesn't really know how to really digest even, how to even go about reconciling, what is being put into it. Because the mind learns things in patterns. If the mind can't decipher a pattern, then it kind of like short circuits, per se. So, when you see Adam and Eve are separated by the Creator God in the book of Genesis, the rest of the book is actually telling you that this is how Adam and Eve are separated, through contradictions. And I read a whole bunch of contradictions from the Bible in part 1. And so, there's no coincidence that King James of Scotland wrote a book based in black magic to burn witches called Demonology. And so, King James of Scotland would consider me to be a witch. In other words, to be a Jew. King James of Scotland, from an esoteric standpoint, does not like Jews, does not like people who have knowledge, if you will, because it threatens his system of slut making. So, King James of Scotland, he likes to make sluts and whores, or beta sex kitten slaves, or whores of Babylon, what have you. And not only does he like to create whores of Babylon and create slave mentalities, but he likes to create whores and then blames them for being whores. In the book of Genesis, when Adam and Eve get wind of evil, people don't really, think to themselves, why did evil exist in the garden before Adam and Eve find knowledge of it? Because it had to exist if you have knowledge of it, right? So if you have knowledge of good and evil existed before, why would he want them to know about something that existed? Evil exists. That's how you have to have knowledge of it. So the fact that, Adam and Eve are living in separation is evil. Because the original Adam was androgynous. So it says in the Bible that God made 2 creations. After the first creation, he hadn't caused it to rain upon the earth yet. And when he caused it to rain upon the earth, he needed somebody to till the ground. He needed somebody to work the field. And so, in other words, he needed slaves. And so whenever you separate Adam and Eve, in other words, feed contradictions into the mind, you are creating a slave mentality. That's why by the end of the Bible, Jesus is crucified. By the time he's fed all these contradictions into your mind and imbalanced your feminine and your masculine aspect of yourself, then you become crucified. And you come to revelation. So, this is what actually a book that King James of Scotland and other slave masters use to burn witches, to burn Jews. You can't separate the mind. You can't separate Adam, the masculine left brain, from Eve, the feminine right brain, and feed all these contradictions into the mind. And then, by the end of the Bible, hey, you're crucified, because the mind cannot take those contradictions, if you will. It causes cognitive dissonance because you're put against yourself. And in cognitive dissonance, this is the same as crucifixion from a psychological standpoint. King James of Scotland is quite evil. And I really just don't know how Christian Grey is going to, that's what I call King James of Scotland. He has an Adonis DNA. So wonderful. I'm going to just be so taken, if you will, by him, because he's so wonderful in his slut making. But, in the slut making that he does, I will let him know that he makes a wonderful slut making business here. you know, creating beta slaves, you know, and molesting children, and feeding them contradictions into their mind to create slave mentalities. And then when they turn out to be sluts, blaming them for being sluts. Bravo. Okay? No, I'm just kidding. You know, I'm being sarcastic, of course. But the thing is that, no, I'm not kidding. Actually, I will sarcastically let him know that this is a joke and he is a joke, and that he's just a filthy, disgusting, degenerate, elitist behind a curtain like the wizard in the Wizard of Oz. Really. You know, that, you know, without his gadgets and without his torture tactics and so forth, he's really nothing. You know, it's like King James of Scotland, and throughout all the crucifixion that I'm experiencing from the astral, he's really just a troll. Like, if it was just me and King James of Scotland in a room without anything or anyone except for me and him, he would lose hands down. But he would not give away all of the different instruments at his disposal to actually destroy me so we could have a level playing field. That goes to show that you're weak and you need to do the course, because it says, the course says that fear is the opposite of love. And you are fearful. You really need to get a life. And you need to get a job, King James of Scotland. That's right, you need to get off of your ass. And you need to work. You need to know what it's like to sit, you know, where I am. That's what you need to do. You need to know what it's like to have your ability to manifest taken away as a little girl and be molested. That's what you need to know. You need to know what it's like to be told lies and then be quickly, abruptly, illuminated to the truth. You need to know what that's like. You need to know what it's like to be put against yourself. But you're so far cut off from yourself that you are a degenerate and you can't even really, get yourself in that space. You know, you're not a god. You know, you're a slut maker. You know? And it's so funny to really see how King James of Scotland really outlines himself as the god of this world. But he's really a slut whore maker. You know, I really don't understand. I really think that, he should really characterize himself as what he really is. He really should. And in pop culture, it does it so well. You know, he puts little innuendos in there in terms of what he really is. Like, if you listen to the song by The Vaults for, what is it? It's a song by The Vaults. It's called, One Last Night, right? I think it's called One Last Night. If you listen to the beginning of that song, she tells you who King James of Scotland really is and how much of a slut maker he is. Listen to it. She says, tied to a sallow heart. Why does he want to bring me where he go, hoes? Listen to it carefully. She says it. She's singing. She says, tied to a sallow heart. Why does he want to bring me where he go, hoes? That's not a coincidence. He wants hoes. That's what King James of Scotland wants, hoes. Whores. And then I get to be blamed for being a whore. Oh. That's wonderful. I understand. You need a lighter bee to believe that. But I have too much melanin this time around. I got too much soul. And so my father, my real father, not my handler, but my father has shown me better, and I know better. I know better than to actually believe in the things that you want me to believe about myself. You know, so I really just wanted to talk about that and talk about how King James of Scotland had a plan to take my divinity, away. And so he programmed my mother. And so, looking up, and doing research and stuff like that, really, this is called, I think it's called Black Madonna programming. Black Madonna programming. You know, the architect of the Matrix, and he's the architect of the Matrix, they put certain programs in place to really destroy the mind. And so, I haven't been receiving a whole lot of gang stalking within my dwelling. Because when you start to vibrate higher and you get wind of, what the Matrix is and glitches in the Matrix, you become a threat. You become what they call Lucifer or Lucy. And Lucifer just means light bearer. And so that's why there's correlations between Jesus and Lucifer, the son of the morning, okay, the bright morning star, or what have you, because I believe that Satan and Jesus are both referred to as such. And so, there's basically correlation between Jesus, the sun, right, the solar plexus, and Satan, if you will. Because, within the doctrines in the Matrix, such as the Bible, of Course in Miracles, and the different 7 deadly sins that are perpetuated through various constructs like media and entertainment, it creates two yous. It creates a conscious son, Jesus, and an unconscious, which is, like a witch. Basically like the Witch and the Wizard of Oz. And so I want to play for you, some footage of when, I spoke to my mom about exposing my sexual abuse and really talking to her about it, because, that was one of the first ways that my soul was damaged and my ability to manifest was taken out. And I really wanted to point this out too, because, I really have, especially since vibrating higher and getting a lot of information, my livelihood, much of my livelihood is gone, has been taken away. I've been forced from several jobs and gang stalked. When I would go places to spend money, my money would not be honored, and I would be treated, inhumanely and with disrespect from different people, from people in the establishments that I would go. And so, gang stalking is not just something that happens at these establishments, but it also happens within the home. And so people don't tend to think that the familial structure is exempt. And this is very insidious, because the familial structure is just as integral to upholding the false ego as the other aspects of society. And so I never in a million years, although, I'd always had issues with my mother, never did I think my own mother would have been instrumental in destroying my solar plexus, and so forth. So I don't accuse my mother of literally molesting me, but she was used to take me every other weekend or so to be molested, and she does not want me to talk about it. And so in these videos, like this first video, she talks about how she went through a lot to have me, and she says that I should not make her regret having me. This is very sick. I would never, ever, ever, ever tell my daughter, don't make me regret having you. To me, you are a sick being. King James of Scotland is really a sicko. So let's hear this, because, this is really disgusting. So she says, I came through a lot in this world to have you, don't make me regret it. I'm sorry. Who would say something so evil and disgusting and degenerate? And so people think that I'm lying when I said that I was lured and coerced to come back to this home. I didn't. Why would I come back to a mother who said that I went through a lot to have you, and so don't make me regret having you? Why would I make a conscious decision to do this? I was coerced. It's no coincidence that my parents live around the corner from a Freemason temple. You said I came through a lot in this world to have you. Don't make me regret it. That doesn't sound really normal. Why would you regret having me? That's very interesting. Don't step on the Lord. Don't make me regret it. You know what they say? So she said something too. She said, "Don't step on the Lord." The Lord, one thing about Lord, people tend to really think like Lord is like God per se. Although King James of Scotland, my handler from the astral, has, put himself on par with God, but Lord really just means king. That's how kings were referred to. They were referred to as lords. So she says, don't step on the Lord. She's talking about King James of Scotland. Okay? That's what she's referring to. Don't step on the Lord. This is crazy. And so she says, don't make me regret having you. Again, why would I make a conscious decision to relocate here with my parents when this person is saying something like, don't make me regret having you? You know what? I did not make a conscious decision. People say, oh, you know what? You have to take responsibility for your decision. The only way you can take responsibility for a decision consciously is if you have knowledge. If my mother, because I had a job before coming here, I passed up a job because my mom sounds so nice and hopeful and supportive over the phone. Come back here, sweetheart. Come on back. Do you think if she had said to me, you know what, don't make me regret having you, do you think that I would have made a conscious decision to come back here? I think not. Okay, let's keep it going, because it gets even worse. Well, I'm going to expose what the agenda is. And so the agenda is to actually to destroy me. That's what the agenda is. So the government is being, he said, destroy myself also. You know what's so funny, Mom? How when I mention these scriptures, you don't say anything. You say that it comes from my Bible, then I read from your Bible, and you're quiet, crickets. But, as soon after I'm done with the scripture, you start to talk, and you say, well, you destroyed yourself. You want to talk about chapter 6 here? No. There's some other ones I could share with you, but you want to talk about me destroying myself? Oh, okay. I don't want to share that with you. I know you don't. Not even the ice cream either, huh, Mom? Oh, that's something. You know what? I thought that you were my mom and you loved me. I don't share myself with you. What did you share with me, Mom? Extension 4? When I was getting molested and I wrote nasty things in my diary. Remember that, Mom? I was getting molested. Who molested you? Oh, let me tell you something. If you want to talk about it, I molested you. Well, you know what? You want to sit down and talk about it? You want to sit down and talk about it now? Tell me who molested you. I want to tell you. Do you want to sit down and talk about it? So I keep asking her because there's an incident that happened when I was a little girl. When I was a little girl, I wrote very nasty things in my diary. And, because during this time I was being molested, she was taking me regularly to be molested at my aunt's house, actually. And and also when I would, when she would take me to get molested, I would be shown pornographic films and stuff like that. So I was writing out, things that, I had, been exposed to as a kid. And so when I told her that, this had happened to me, that I had been molested and so forth, she told me that she did not believe me. I asked her to sit down and talk about it and discuss it, and she told me that she did not want to discuss it. Well, she didn't say I don't want to discuss it. She kept asking. She said, who molested you? And I said, well, let's sit down and talk about it. And so she doesn't want to talk about it because she was used. She was used to actually molest me and to rot out my solar plexus, my kundalini. And so she doesn't want those things to come to light. And so she really just wants to blame the person who did the actual molestation, but doesn't want to actually, you know, I guess you would say, put her part into it. You know what I mean? To really kind of give way to the part that she had. And she actually feels very convicted, although I never told her, you molested me. She feels convicted, and she starts to convict herself, saying, I never molested you, and so forth. I never said that you did. Superficially, I never said that you did. But we're going to get to the involvement that you had.
If you want to talk about it, well, you know what? You want to sit down and talk about it? You want to sit down and talk about it or no? Tell me who molested you. I want to tell you. Do you want to sit down and talk about it? You can tell me standing there. No. Do you want to sit down and talk about it? Tell me who said it to you. Mom, you're not answering my question. Do you want to sit down and talk about it? Your daddy and your brother did it to you. Do you want to sit down and, you know what? It's so funny. I love it. Because let me tell you something. You know the truth. You don't want me to expose the truth. I know the truth. Well, the thing is that if you didn't know the truth, you would sit down to talk about it. If my daughter came to me and said, you know what? I was sexually abused and I was molested. You know what? I would say to her, and she said, you know what, Mom? I want to sit down and talk about this to you and talk about how I came to be who I am in my unconscious. And you know what? You don't believe? Oh, well, you know what?
She said, I don't believe that you were molested. What type of mother would say to her kid, I don't believe that you were molested? Now listen, in the previous video she said, don't make me regret having you. And now she says, I don't believe you were molested. Really? Wow. All I can say is, I see your true colors coming through or shining through. And I sing this to her actually.
That's fine. I don't care whether you believe it or not. It does not matter. You know, and really, that's really evil. Some people, somebody who actually, let me tell you something. If I said to my daughter came to me and said, you know what? I was molested. And you said, I don't believe you. That is sad and that is sick. And yeah, that's very sad. But you know what? I see your true colors shine. I see your true colors, and that's why I'm going to expose you.
Yeah, so I told her, I said, you know, it really took everything within me, to be honest with you, not to, it took everything within me not to react in a very, masculine type of way. Because this has definitely affected my ability to manifest. And you know, I'm at odds with myself in manifesting because of my having my kundalini rotted out, you know, as a little kid, and having that imbalance and not being able to really get in touch with the kundalini in balance so I could manifest at will. And the fact that I was taken by her most weekends to get that rotted out. You know, and how she is affiliated with Freemasonry. That she's affiliated with Freemasonry, and that woman who considers herself to be my mother is not my real mother. How she is not my real mother. How I was placed within this family to be victimized. I was victimized, and to actually tell me that don't make me regret having you. Who would say something like that? Especially someone that, you know, because as in previous videos, you know, my mother has talked about my mental health. Why would you say to someone that you thought had mental health issues, don't make me regret having you, and I don't believe that you were molested? Does that make any sense? And so gang stalking, we're often put into mental institutions or pushed on the fringes of society so we can be incarcerated. And so I wanted to show her true colors because she's starting to shapeshift out. But let's keep going.
Did I say that come out of my mouth? That's I molested you. No, I didn't say that. You super.
Now listen, I'm going to go back here because she starts to get confrontational, saying I molested you, but she starts to laugh. She starts laughing. This is very sick and sadistic. Like, to be honest with you, I don't really see how you can come back from this. This is evil. This is flat out evil. How are you going to laugh at something like this. She starts to laugh. I, I really just don't understand.
I see your true colors, and that's why I'm going to expose you. That's right. I molested you? Excuse me. Did I say that come out of my mouth? That's what I molested you? How the hell I molested you? No. I didn't say that you.
She started laughing. She said, how the hell did I molest you? Who does that? Who laughs at something like that? Who laughs and says, how the hell did I molest you? First of all, I never said that you molested me. Now, we're going to talk about you taking me every other weekend to get molested. But you superficially, as my earthly mother, no. You did not molest me. You know, but everything in the physical has significance in the metaphysical. Let's keep going.
No, I didn't say that you superficially, from the superficial, because, superficially you did not molest me. But the thing about it is this, I want to sit down to speak to you, and you will not sit down with me. That's very telling. What are you afraid of? And my daughter was sitting here, and she said, you know what, I was sexually abused, and I really want to talk to you about this. And I said, well, who's sexually abused? And I say, I'll tell you, but I really want to go and really explain to you everything that's happened, not just talk about the sexual abuse, but talk about the psychological programming. You want to hear about the sexual abuse? I don't know when I molested you. Did I say that you molested me superficially? That's the way you in person. You implied. I implied it? How did I imply that? Tell me, be specific. I don't know how to molest you. I'm asking you, when I ask you these questions, no. When I ask you about being specific, maybe I will. Yeah, I'll take it. Why not? Because, I have to get food any way I possibly can nowadays, right? Yeah, so thanks for offering, Mom. That's really nice of you. Yeah. Thank you. But the thing about it is this. The tartar sauce in it. Oh, thank you. You don't take long either. Okay.
So she does this as a psychological tactic because, my mom has thrown away food that I bought and refused to give me food. Although she told me to ask for food if I wanted something and then refused to give it to me. This is very sick and sad. But when she offers me some food, she really is trying to say, you know what, I don't really want to talk about your molestation or my involvement with it. So, I'm going to, kind of poke fun, if you will, at the fact that I have been torturing you in terms of food lately and feeding you. So that's what it's really saying. Remember, gang stalking is not so much about what's said, but when it comes to metaphysics and the mind, it's about the things that are not said. So if you look at my food videos, you will see how she's been acting about food. Like I have one about ice cream and how she told me that I could have some ice cream, then she said I couldn't have it. And she told me to ask for food, then told me not to ask. It's just a whole lot of things surrounding food. So she's very... this is very evil.
The thing about it is this. The tartar sauce in it. Oh, thank you. You don't take long either. Okay, Mom. But the thing about it is this. You said that I accused you of molesting me superficially, right? That's what you said. I see. So, that's what you said. Mom, you just...
Now, she just said, accused it. You just heard her saying that I accused her of molesting me. And when I told her, so you said that I told you that you, molested me, she starts to make me think I'm crazy. She said, I didn't say that. Are you insane? Oh, darn. Let me pull back the video because it went away. But the thing about it is this. You heard her. She just said, you said I molested you, da-da-da. So when I said, okay, Mom, you said that, I said that you molested me. I didn't say that. That sounds insane, but this is what happens when it comes to psychological games. And so when I talk about gang stalking in my videos, I really try to shed light on how there's contradictions, just like there's contradictions in the Matrix, and there's contradictions in the Bible, and of course in miracles. When it comes to programming in terms of the family, there's contradictions there as well. And so she's going back on things that she actually has said. This is insane. So let me see if I can go back to the part that I was on. Okay, it's on
Mom,
it.
you said that I said this. This is so psychological warfare, trying to actually, psych me out to think that I'm crazy. I gave you everything I have. I gave you everything I had. Something I gave you, I didn't. Why are you diverting the conversation? You said that I accused you of sexually abusing me. How big is it? Mom, so you said, I want you to articulate and tell me how that came to be. How you're not articulating, Mom. You're not making a lot of rational sense. Mom, I just said that superficially you did not molest me. From a superficial standpoint, that's not what you did. But I told you that I was sexually abused, and you told me, you just said that I don't believe you. That's sick. I would never say something like that to my daughter. Never. And so, I see your true colors. I never said that my mother sexually molested me. You, my earthly mother, never sexually molested me. You're my earthly mother. You're trying to convict me and say things that I said when I did not. So thanks for the fish bowl. This definitely is turning around here. I'm so happy to hear, that, that you're on my side, right? You're kind of sick. Well, I hope you feel better. Is there something that I can do for you?
So, you know, going back to how this is all affiliated with Freemasonry, it all connects back to King James of Scotland, who's my handler, who actually handles and owns all the souls within this matrix reality. My mother has been programmed to victimize me. She's a victimizer program, so to speak. And so, it's funny because there's a contradiction within this, because my mother always raised me to be very close to her. Very close to her, to rely on her for every single thing. I was very much not given any independence away from her, especially in my earlier years. Even right on through high school. I got a little job or whatever, but I very much didn't really have any independence. Couldn't do things that normal people did, like go to dances and football games and, like to the movies and, things that normal teenagers did. I was not allowed to do. Everything was pretty much secretive, and I just spent time with my family. And I was never allowed to really find really true, strong connections with people outside of my family structure until I got older and I went to, really when I went to college. That's when I started really kind of branch out and flower out into, to being, to having some independence, so to speak, at least what I thought to be independence at the time. But there's a contradiction when it came to our relationship, because although my mother raised me to be very dependent upon her, she was also very distant, and she really, she was just there. There was no love, no warmth from her. I really got love from my sister, and so it was I get kind of choked up about it, but it was nothing. And so I got absolutely nothing in terms of but anyway, so I didn't really understand that, it's funny because I really feel like my sister, was that person that really should have been my mother. You know, in fact, I would call my sister, I would, you know, refer to my sister as my mother in Hebrew, actually. Um, you know, I would refer to my sister as Ima. And I would have my daughter call her Lola, which is grandmother. And what is it? I can't remember the language. I think it's people who are from the Philippines refer to their grandparents as, or their grandmothers as Lola. And so it's very interesting how just evil, how evil this is. I've never seen anything like this, you know? So, um, so yeah, you know, it's just very interesting that to hear something like this come from her, and to hear her shapeshift out. You know, this was definitely not a conscious decision. I was coerced to come back here to be crucified and buried under my unconscious mind. This is evil. And I'm definitely about shedding light on this and showing just how evil this is. You know, that you're not going to beat the sun, not in this one. You're not going to beat the light. You know, the darkness is not going to beat the light in this incarnation. You're not going to. This is going to be Invictus. This is going to be Invictus, and you're not going to conquer the sun in this one. Because I am here to bring light to this evil, disgusting situation and what has been done to me, and the fact that this person that's been calling itself my mother my whole life has told me that she doesn't believe that I was molested. Also, although she took me to be molested most weekends, and this person says, "Don't make me regret having you." I mean, you shown your true colors right then and there. I would never say anything like that to my daughter, especially one that I thought was mentally ill. So, anywho, you know, that pretty much ends my, you know, video. You know, I just wanted to talk about, you know, cognitive dissonance, and talk about, you know, the contradictions in terms of thought from when you were programmed to when you were, illuminated, and how, you know, cognitive dissonance is definitely created by destroying the solar plexus. And, I don't know. And how, you know, the solar plexus is destroyed through sexual abuse and programming via the constructs of the matrix, including the Bible, going back to the division between Adam and Eve and all the contradictions that are within the Bible itself. And, you know, just telling you pretty much what, you know, how King James of Scotland created my family and really used my mother especially to cover up my divinity. You know, I just want to say too, you know, within the situation that, you know, I don't really blame my mother. I don't. You know, my mother doesn't even know who I am. My mother's a robot. You know, she doesn't know me. You know, she's programmed. She's programmed to destroy me. You know, and so, you know, I just really look at her in terms of flesh. You know, I've ascended to a point where I'm beyond the flesh. And so it's sad because, you know, I have to look at everybody in that same light, not just her, but the people that I love and care about. They've never known me. No one has ever known me. You know, it kind of goes back into the Bible where it says, no one's ever seen God. No one has ever known me, the Christ. No one's ever known me. Everyone has, you know, that I have loved, that I've ever loved and hated, regardless of what, loved or hated, has never known me. I have known them, but they have not known me. And that's very sad. That's very sad. And there will be a day of reckoning, not within this world, but within another world. There will be a day of reckoning for the elite in King James of Scotland who has actually done this to me. So I just want to end this, and you know, just I will see you guys in my next video.